Chapter 226, 2 Swords in My Case, Subduing Demons and Eliminating Fiends. Su Yuanxia poured himself a cup of wine and sighed with emotion. Don't think that I'm being an alarmist and trying to scare you guys. Not only have I witnessed such things before, but I've personally experienced it firsthand as well. Several of my friends died because of their kindness. Su Yuanxia pointed at his bag nearby and said calmly, I won't go into the details, but out of us 4 friends, I was the only one who made it out alive. One of them didn't even leave a corpse. I was at least able to collect the corpses of the other 2, and I've already delivered the ash urn of one person to his family. As for the ash urn of the other person, that's the purpose of my trip to Azure Phoenix Nation. It was no wonder that the big bearded martial artist had twice told Zhang Shanfeng and Chen Ping'an to leave the old residence as quickly as possible. Brother Su, you're a chivalrous man. Do you regret the decision you made back then? Chen Ping'an suddenly asked. The big bearded martial artist lowered his head and dejectedly took a few sips of wine. After raising his head, he pursed his lips and said, My friends have already died, so I have no idea if they regret their decisions or not. But as the sole survivor, I regret it to death. This was possibly the first time that the gallant and proud martial artist had spoken in such a dejected and ungallant manner. Chen Ping'an didn't explicitly say whether he wanted to stay or leave. During his trip to Great Sui Nation with Li Baoping and the others, he had always been the one making the decisions out of necessity. Moreover, he hadn't been allowed to show any weakness or hesitation. Now that he was traveling around the world by himself, there was no longer any need for him to make decisions for others. Zhang Shanfeng was clearly at a loss, and he looked around and asked, Then what should we do? Su Yuanxia fell silent, and he continued to take sips of wine. If we stay, and we step forward to face any challenges, how likely is it that we'll have problems protecting ourselves? Chen Ping'an asked. Su Yuanxia carefully organized the words in his mind before replying. The biggest danger is our enemies having allies among us and using these allies to launch a surprise attack. If it were me, I would definitely use some technique to suppress the gods in the Wencheng Pavilion and the Martial Sage Temple. Moreover, it looks like the gods in the Wencheng Pavilion and the Martial Sage Temple have already become weak due to the negative effects of the old residence and the illegal temple, so it's very easy for issues to appear in these areas. Fortunately, the incense, layout, and aura of the city god temple looked fairly good to me when I visited not long ago. Can we directly look for the city god and explain the situation to him? Chen Ping'an asked. Prefectural Overseer Liu and General Ma might not understand the existence and power of these strange things. Even if they truly come across such a situation, they can likely shirk responsibility using the fancy words and explanations of politicians. However, the city god's health and situation are intricately tied to that of the prefectural city. To put things bluntly, Prefectural Overseer Liu can hide and General Ma can keep his army put, but the city god definitely can't escape. Moreover, if the demons and evil spirits are truly scheming for something, then it's almost certain that they'll target the local city god first. In this sense, the city god definitely cares about this matter more than the local officials. Su Yuanxia's eyes lit up, and he heavily slapped his thigh and exclaimed in a solemn voice, This is a good plan. Zhang Shanfeng smiled and raised a thumb at Chen Ping'an. Someone knocked on the door at this moment, and Chen Ping'an walked over to see who it was. As it turned out, it was Liu Chicheng, Liu Geahua, and Liu Geahua's older sister. They had anxious expressions, and Liu Geahua poured himself a large cup of wine after sitting down. Don't you guys find this strange? The statue of the heavenly official in the city god temple suddenly cracked apart just now, and there's even blood flowing from it and painting the floor red. Not only that, but the city god temple is also filled with snakes, rats, and scorpions. It's absolutely revolting. My father has sent people over to close the city god temple, lest the sight of these things frighten the residents of the city. There was a serious expression on Su Yuanxia's face, and he remained silent as he exchanged a glance with Chen Ping'an and Zhang Shanfeng. What about the Wencheng Pavilion and the Martial Sage Temple? Chen Ping'an asked. Liu Geahua faltered upon hearing this, and he shook his head and replied, I'm not sure about those 2 places. The locals don't like visiting the Wenchang Pavilion and the Martial Sage Temple, especially since there's nothing much to see in those places. Liu Geahua's older sister was still a little uneasy around Chen Ping'an, and she only dared to sit next to Liu Chicheng, as far as she could from the young boy. Her voice was soft and mellow as she said, "When I was taking some tea to father, I coincidentally heard him mention something to an elderly Taoist guest. Even though the Wencheng Pavilion and the Martial Sage Temple enjoy a lot of incense and offerings, these incense and offerings are regarded as things that are offered but not accepted." The elderly Taoist priest also felt helpless about this, and he said that there was nothing the imperial court could do about this situation. Colorful Garment Nation is only so big, so it's impossible for an additional formal mountain god to be appointed. He also said that if a prodigious scholar from Blusher Prefecture managed to enter Lakeview Academy, the feng shui of this place might potentially improve. My father sighed and shook his head when he heard this, and he said that Blusher Prefecture didn't have the ability to invite such an impressive scholar over. Liu Chicheng was stumped, and he asked with a puzzled expression, "What are you guys talking about? What Wencheng Pavilion and Martial Sage Temple? What formal mountain god? However, I am familiar with Lakeview Academy. It's next to the border of White Mountain Nation, and I've visited and gone inside the academy several times." Can I be considered somewhat of a prodigious scholar then? Rest assured, Miss Liu, Lakeview Academy recruits one scholar from White Mountain Nation each year, and this can be considered special treatment toward White Mountain Nation. One day, perhaps I can also. Liu Geahua rolled his eyes and snapped, "Give it a rest, why don't you? You're barely more knowledgeable than me." Liu Chicheng huffed and shut his mouth. His jumbled knowledge from the different teachings was effective against women, but not very useful against fellow scholars. After chatting for a while, Liu Geahua and his older sister took their leave first. Before leaving, Liu Geahua recalled something and warned, "Judging from what my father said while we were at the city god temple just then, the entire prefectural city will go under martial law starting from tomorrow. It will be easy to leave but difficult to enter. However, it's entirely possible that it will become difficult to leave as well after a while. Because of this, Liu Chicheng has decided to leave the city tomorrow. What about the three of you? Let me say this first. If the city truly goes under martial law tomorrow, then General Ma will definitely be involved in it. At that time, I won't be able to help you even if I'm the prefectural overseer's son. So, if you want to leave, you should do so by tomorrow night at the latest." Liu Chicheng had already walked out with Liu Geahua's older sister. They were reluctantly farewelling each other in Zhang Shanfeng's room, and they thankfully didn't get too lovey-dovey with each other, because Liu Geahua was still standing there and waiting for them. After Su Yuanxia closed the door, he lightly tapped the table with his fingers and said, "It's almost certain that the city god temple has already been negatively affected. By the looks of it, these demons and heretical cultivators are scheming something big. I wonder if the cultivation base of Blusher Prefecture's city god has fallen, and if those people have trapped him inside the city god temple using some underhanded method. Or perhaps he's already been killed. The situation is dire right now, but things are also becoming clearer and clearer. The prefectural overseer and the nearby army should be on high alert as well. If we warn them about the situation now, our credibility will be much higher than before." Zhang Shanfeng looked at Chen Ping'an and asked in a hesitant voice, "Maybe we should warn the prefectural overseer before leaving." Chen Ping'an nodded and replied, "You and Brother Su can leave with Liu Geahua to warn the prefectural overseer about the situation. I'm going to take a trip to the city god temple to verify the situation. The earlier we learn of the truth, even if it's only a small slice of the truth, the more beneficial it will be to our decision-making." Zhang Shanfeng wasn't confused about the need to split up. However, he couldn't understand why it was Chen Ping'an heading over to the dangerous city god temple instead of him. Chen Ping'an smiled and explained, "Chivalrous Su needs to draw his saber, and it's best that he can summon gusts of fierce winds as well. This can demonstrate his status as a martial arts grandmaster. Meanwhile, you need to have your peachwood sword fly through the air so that you can prove your identity as a Taoist priest from Mount Longhu. This will demonstrate your ability to slay demons and subdue fiends. What will I do if I go to the prefectural office?" throw punches in front of the prefectural overseer. The big bearded martial artist roared with laughter. Zhang Shanfeng also understood Chen Ping'an's intentions, and the young Taoist priest told him to wait for a while. He then went to his room to retrieve 3 talismans. 2 were of the lowest quality, but they were the most useful evil-detecting talismans. The yellow paper talisman would immediately self-combust upon detecting sinister auras. The final talisman was a divine movement talisman. After funneling some spiritual qi or true qi into the talisman, one could run as fast as a horse for 15 minutes. One could run on the wind without expending any energy. Chen Ping'an didn't refuse these talismans, and he placed them inside his sleeve. "Aren't you afraid that I'll run away?" he asked in amusement. The young Taoist priest widened his eyes and exclaimed, "Chen Ping'an, you can't do that." Chen Ping'an hurriedly shook his hands. Zhang Shanfeng started to chuckle to himself. If Chen Ping'an fled, Zhang Shanfeng would indeed feel sad about losing that expensive divine movement talisman. However, he would feel even sadder about losing a good friend. The 3 of them parted ways at the entrance of the inn. Su Yuanxia left with Zhang Shanfeng, and they followed Liu Geahua to the prefectural office located in the west of the prefectural city. Chen Ping'an was coincidentally heading in the same direction as the impoverished scholar, Liu Chicheng. One was heading to the city gate in the east, while one was heading to the city god temple in the northeast. Miss Liu wasn't present, so Liu Chicheng no longer conducted himself as a scholar. He lowered his head and bowed his back as he walked beside Chen Ping'an, and he asked in curiosity, "Young Master Chen, are you a legendary martial arts grandmaster? Even though you're young and have only just entered the cultivation world, perhaps you're already a paramount elite because of your supreme talent and impressive background. Is it because of this that your slap was so quick and ethereal that night? In fact, I was completely unable to detect your attack. Can this be viewed as reaching a divine level? As long as it's a martial artist attacking you, you naturally won't be able to detect their attack." Chen Ping'an replied in exasperation. As if suffering great humiliation, Liu Chicheng exclaimed, "That's impossible. Young Master Chen is definitely a martial arts grandmaster hidden in the mortal cities. If I were to hazard a guess, perhaps you're the final disciple of Colorful Garment Nation's sword god who's renowned in several neighboring nations. Otherwise, who carries 2 swords with them when they're traveling outside. One of them is Illuminating Sun, the sword used by the sword god while he traveled around the world back then. Am I correct? Can I touch it?" Chen Ping'an was quite impressed by this person's imagination. However, he was unwilling to speak nonsense with him, so he put on a stern expression and replied with a nod, "Yes, this is Illuminating Sun, so you need to be careful. My case is filled with razor-sharp sword qi, so you'll immediately be wounded by them once you take the sword out. Are you afraid?" "No, I'm not afraid," Liu Chicheng said with a shake of his head. He had initially wanted to touch the sword case, but his hands were now obediently clasped behind his back. After the 2 of them parted ways, Liu Chicheng continued to walk along the street toward the east gate of the prefectural city. The frail scholar suddenly raised his head and glanced at a figure standing atop the city wall. It was none other than the old immortal who had performed on the tall stage in the middle of the lake. The armored General Ma was standing beside him at this moment, and there were 2 other elderly but unfamiliar faces standing next to them. The old immortal was pointing at places around the prefectural city. Liu Chicheng clicked his tongue in wonder and remarked, "Inviting a thief into the house, but completely oblivious to the fact." Elsewhere, it wasn't long before Chen Ping'an arrived at the square outside the city god temple. He focused his gaze, yet he was unable to detect anything because he wasn't a qi refiner. However, his instinct as a pure martial artist told him that there was an extra hint of bloodshed and darkness surrounding the city god temple that had red walls, green roofs, and a glazed top. It no longer appeared as peaceful and tranquil as his first visit. This was analogous to someone tossing a piece of charcoal onto a snow-covered ground. Perhaps ordinary passersby wouldn't notice anything out of the ordinary, but those with good vision and keen observation would definitely see the piece of charcoal. Moreover, it would appear especially jarring. There were soldiers from the prefectural office standing guard outside the city god temple, and they prohibited people from entering the temple to offer incense. Chen Ping'an took a deep breath before looking around and finding a relatively secluded wall. He snuck over and retrieved an evil-detecting talisman. After arriving there, he leaped over the wall when no one was looking. Upon landing inside the city god temple, the evil-detecting talisman between his fingers immediately self-combusted and burned to a crisp. There was no need to verify anything else. It was already abundantly clear that this was the doing of demons and evil spirits. Chen Ping'an grabbed his sword-nurturing gourd and took a large swig of wine. At the same time, he reached behind his back and patted the wooden case. The locust wood sword was called Eliminating Fiends, and the sword that Master Ruan had forged was temporarily called Subduing Demons. Regardless of how much the little boy in azure and the little girl in pink looked down on these names, saying that they were common and basic, Chen Ping'an felt like the names Subduing Demons and Eliminating Fiends were very good. Since he had chosen such good names for these swords, he naturally couldn't let them down. Chen Ping'an used his foot to gently flick away a venomous snake that was furiously slithering over. His movements appeared gentle and calm, yet the bones and flesh of the venomous snake immediately shattered in midair. Right now, Chen Ping'an's focus was on the two colorful clay statues of heavenly officials that were standing outside the red lacquer gate of the hall. One stood to the left and one stood to the right, and blood streamed down both of them. There were countless multicolored venomous snakes slithering over them, and there were also palm-sized pitch-black scorpions resting on their heads and arms and showing off their strength. In fact, there were even rats wantonly scuttling in and out of the clay statues, broken abdomens and faces. Chen Ping'an was involuntarily reminded of the terrible state of the immortal tomb in his hometown. He was instantly infuriated, and he slowly walked over following the direction of the wall. He tried his best to calm his breath and remain composed. After all, being angry wouldn't increase one's strength, nor would it allow one's true qi to circulate quicker. As he advanced, Chen Ping'an quietly said in his mind, "Chen Ping'an, if you truly can't defeat them, then you need to flee as quickly as you can."